Hey there, I'm Brittany from Quarter Acre Roots, where we talk about growing a lot on a little bit of space. And today I'm going to walk you guys through how I like to prepare a turfgrass area for planting. We have been working through converting different areas of our traditional turfgrass lawn to gardens for a couple years now. And today I'm working on a small little area behind our little greenhouse. It has 2 rain barrels and a giant compost bin. So we want to kill off the grass just so it's a little bit cleaner of an area. And then I'm also going to be planting a native honeysuckle vine here. There are many different ways that you can prepare a turfgrass area for planting and improve that soil. One of the best ways to prepare an area for planting is just to dump a thick layer of mulch or wood chips and then let it sit for a couple years. But I want to supercharge this. I don't want to wait 2 years to plant something in the ground here. So I'm going to show you guys how I do that using a little manual edger. You can also use a shovel to edge out the area that you're killing off. I'm also going to use some leaf compost. You can really use any kind of compost, anything to just supercharge that soil with the good stuff and improve it quickly. I'm going to use some paper bags. You can use newspaper, you can use cardboard, anything like that to smother out the grass. And then I'm going to be using some buckets of mulch. You can use wood chips, you can use undyed shredded hardwood mulch, anything like that works just fine. One of the reasons why I'm working on this area today is one, it's just one of the many projects on our list to work on this spring, but I also have all of these buckets of mulch here. So we have a local compost program in our county that is amazing. I love going to get super cheap compost from our solid waste municipality, but they also have mulch. We usually do not get mulch through this source. We just get bulk deliveries, but I drove all the way out to the dump to get a bunch of buckets of cheap compost yesterday and they were out of it. So I just thought, I'm already out here. I've already waited in the line to get in the dump. I'm just gonna fill up all my buckets with mulch and find a use for them. And this is like the perfect size small area to work on using this mulch. I'll probably use all of the 5-gallon buckets today. So that's why I'm knocking this project out now. I have all of these buckets of mulch that I need to use. I already know roughly the area that I'm going to edge out. I'm going to go from the edge of this bed here all the way down to the edge of the greenhouse. I really like using this tool to edge out areas that I'm planting because it just gives me like a nice clean break and it gives me a nice deep area where I can transition whatever I'm mulching or wood chipping back to grass. Now, of course, you can just dump whatever you're using to smother out your grass, or you don't have to edge it out, but this area is like up close next to my greenhouse and my beds. So I wanted a slightly neater look for this. It's really not that much extra work. One thing you have to be aware of though is when you are edging out your beds and digging out that area, you are going to generate a decent amount of dirt. So you can see what I'm doing here is just taking the sharp edge of this manual edger and I am just breaking that up. So I'm not completely digging it out. I'm just kind of like flipping it over and then flattening it out a little bit using the edge of this trowel. I'll give you guys a closer look what this looks like now that I'm closer to the camera. I'm not too uptight about how straight the lines are, but every once in a while I like to step back and make sure I'm not veering too far off course here and making it more of a circle or a semicircle than a straight line. It's not gonna be perfectly straight because I'm not measuring and marking anything, but I'm just gonna keep going, keep flipping this grass over to create that little border here and chopping it up. Okay, I've got this area all edged out. I decided to do like a little curve on the side here just because corners are so hard to maintain and I want it to look a little bit more natural. So the next thing I'm going to do is come in here, trying to avoid being a worm killer by stabbing out as much of this clumpy dirt as I can. And then I'm also going to go in here and just hand pull some of these weeds out because if I don't pull them all out before I try to smother them, I think that will definitely increase the chances of them breaking through. We do have a lot of weeds in our lawn because we do not treat our lawn with any sort of like weed and feed anymore because I really want to be encouraging the clover to take off. And a lot of those weed and seeds, they kill off the clover, which makes me sad because I purposefully will seed the lawn with clover. I find it's pretty challenging to get it to overtake the grass, but I try and seed like every fall to get as much clover as I can taking over because it's such an excellent nitrogen fixer for the soil and it's just so pretty. So some of these giant chunks here that I did not break up that are like really weedy, I'm just gonna go ahead and pull those out and put them in a little pile and stick them into a yard waste bin. You can compost them as well, but otherwise I'm just trying to tidy this space up a little bit. All right, so I've hand pulled out a lot of the weeds I had in here. I've come in with my little edger and stabbed out a lot of those chunks to smooth it out. I'd show you guys what it looks like, but it will probably look exactly the same to you as it looked a minute ago. So now I'm going to go grab some leaf compost and I am going to just dump that over most of this planting area. I'm not gonna dump it over everything because it's expensive. I'm still buying bags of leaf compost. I'm just gonna put it in the areas where I'm planning to plant. And basically what that's gonna do is just supercharge getting this soil nice and healthy and ready for planting. I'm only gonna plant on one side today. I'm gonna plant a honeysuckle vine and add a little trellis, but the other side I'll probably plant sometime either later this year or next year, and that soil will be lovely by the time I am ready to plant. This is the stuff that I am using. All of these bags, I bought a bunch of these I cashed in some credit card points to get a Lowe's gift card. I like to do that in the Chase Ultimate Rewards portal whenever the Lowe's gift cards are on sale so I can buy compost using my credit card points for a discount. This stuff is made in Maryland. I love it. You can get your compost anywhere. And then I'm just gonna dump some of this bag over here where I know I'm going to be planting later this year or next year. I'm not gonna dump it here because I'm probably never gonna be planting here since this is the spigot for a rain barrel. Probably gonna put a paver here or something for a watering can. And I'm gonna come to the other side over here and dump some more. Show you guys what this compost looks like. This stuff is gorgeous, delicious, beautiful leaf compost. Again, these bags I love because they are made in Maryland. That's where I am located, but you can use whatever compost you can get your hands on or make your own, which that's one of my goals for this year is to really increase the amount of compost that we're making here using leaves. And this right here is a kitchen waste compost bin, so just takes time. So until then, we're going to be just supplementing with this leaf compost bags. Just gonna put it all in around here. And since this is a compost bin, as this decomposes, this is gonna help the soil in the area as well, which is nice. Okay, I don't wanna bury this bin too deep, so I wanna move some of this over here. Again, you don't need much, just a thin layer. This is not what's gonna be smothering out grass. And then since this compost bin right here does have like a front area that you pull up and you can take the compost and stuff out of the front, definitely want to make sure I'm not burying too deep right here. Then this next step is definitely optional, but since I am going to be putting a native honeysuckle vine in right here, I want it to eventually grow back up the back of the greenhouse, maybe even the side, so that when it does take off in the spring and summer, it can provide some natural shade for the greenhouse because it gets very, very hot. I'm just gonna dig out a small hole here and just put in a little bit of this soil. Since it is a native honeysuckle vine, it will do just fine in our native soil here, but I still like to mix in a little of this good stuff too, just to give it a little bit of a good head start. While I'm planting the vine, I'm gonna go ahead and stick this vinyl plant trellis in here. This will eventually need a bigger structure, but for the first year, this is gonna be fine just to establish the vine and give it something to climb. This is something I got for free too, so I love free. Got this from one of my friends who is getting rid of it, and usually when someone texts me and asks, do you want this free thing I have? The answer is usually yes. So I'm probably gonna come in here and drive a T-post down in here and just zip tie it to that just to anchor it, or maybe anchor it to the back of the greenhouse now, but for now this is fine. Now once I have all my compost down and I have the plant I wanna put here planted, I am going to come in with paper bags. These are just like paper grocery store bags, and I am going to start laying these around where I'm going to mulch. So I like to kind of lay them so that they kind of fold over the edge here, and it's a bit of a windy day, so I'm going to be putting them in place and then adding just a little bit of mulch on top of them so they don't blow away while I'm placing everything, because that's very annoying. You can also wet these down as you are laying them, because as they get wet, they will kind of conform more to the soil, which is nice. But our hose is not unwinterized yet, so we're just gonna work with what we've got here. And pro tip, if you can do this on a day that's not super windy, definitely do it on a day that's not super windy, because I've got pieces blowing around here everywhere. So it is Sunday, so today is a day I have to work. So we work when we can. Now, I am a little bit like meticulous about this. It's kind of insane sometimes, but I do like to take those little pieces I ripped off and put them up around the plant, just because anywhere that you don't sheet mulch is going to be much more prone to weed breakthrough. And you know, this isn't an exact science. You are going to have weed breakthroughs. So just accept that now, accept that as you're working on your project. You can also cut these up in advance. I just like to kind of rip them up roughly evenly so that they will be about the size that I'm looking for. I'm gonna take these like longer pieces and just kind of like lay them along the edge here to get this area. Again, not an exact science. You'll probably have to come in and just do a couple little vinegar sprays or something to get rid of some of the grass that's breaking through. I always have breakthrough the first year I sheet mulch, even the second year. But once you get to the third year, you're looking pretty good by then in terms of what's able to grow up through. I do like to have a little bit of overlap too. Weeds that have runners are just gonna run underground and pop up where they want to, but weeds that don't have runners, you'll more easily smother them out, many types of grass, just by overlapping just a little bit. I like using paper bags for stuff like this instead of landscaping fabric, because the paper bags are going to degrade over time, just kind of compost into that soil, whereas landscaping fabric, I only like to use that in areas that I know I'm not going to plant. So like if I'm like laying a path or something with pavers and I have landscaping fabric, I just end up with it somehow, because I don't ever remember buying landscaping fabric. It just shows up in my shed. You know, I take free stuff from people all the time, so that's probably where a lot of it is coming from. So now that I've got most of this laid with paper bags here, I'm just going to fill in with mulch. I do not worry too much about getting mulch into this area, because this is gonna settle over time as things decompose. So it's really hard to keep it out of that trench. A lot of people like to keep it out of the trench just to avoid grass growing in, but I'm not too worried about that. What this is gonna do over time, obviously adding the mulch, nice organic matter that we're adding on top of that paper bag that's going to decompose, and that leaf compost, this is really going to go a long way in improving that soil. And as this settles, you can come in and do some touch-up mulching as well. Cover up exposed areas or pull out weeds that pop through. This will get us to a good spot. Typically, sheet mulching is a pretty fast process, especially when you get to areas like this where it's just like a big open area where you have to lay paper bags and you don't have to work around a lot of stuff. So we started off with one of the hardest parts, honestly, working around the plants, working around the compost bin, whereas this whole area is super easy. Just have to layer in these bags and spread some mulch so what we put down doesn't blow away as soon as we put it down. Some of these other areas I missed back here. Little guy out, and then pop this in. Okay, I have finished up laying all of the mulch around here. It looks really great, super tidy. We definitely need some rain to come in to help things settle a bit, but I'm going to show you guys what it looks like. I have the trellis off to the side here because I definitely do need to either anchor it in place on here or put a fence T-post down in here to anchor it. But we've got our nice little vine planted. This looks super nice, super tidy. And again, it will probably definitely get weeds. That's just the nature of things. It looks super clean right now, but as long as you stay on top of any breakthrough, you should have a pretty successful experience with smothering out your grass and starting a garden this way. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the frequently asked questions and some of the comments that I get when I talk about planting this way with sheet mulching. First is, why are you using cardboard? You could just dump mulch and wood chips on. And yes, I totally agree. That is a very effective way of smothering out areas. So this whole area used to be grass here. We converted this into our asparagus patch and an area for just growing kind of whatever we want. It's got garlic in it right now. And the paths, there are some areas here where I did put down landscaping fabric, but other areas where we just piled it super high. And we didn't have much breakthrough grass the first year, and the weeds have been actually pretty shockingly suppressed over here. The dirt and compost areas definitely get more weeds weeds than the mulched paths, but overall this has been a very successful strategy. But like I mentioned, I wanted to plant and kind of like supercharge improving the soil in the area back behind the greenhouse. So instead of just dumping on thick mulch, I decided to put down a little bit of compost, put down some thin paper bags to help smother out that grass and block the light, and then dump mulch on top of that. So there are a million different ways you can do this. I kind of take this method and tweak it depending on what I'm planting, what my timeline is, and honestly, what I have on hand to use. Another thing that I want to address is a frequent comment that I get about using cardboard or paper bags. And a lot of people will ask, well, isn't there toxic stuff in cardboard and paper bags? And do you use colored ink? Do you use things like that in your garden when you're smothering out grass? The answer is yes, I do use colored ink. I just don't use anything that's glossy. So a lot of newspapers and paper bags and things like that have long switched to soy-based inks. Now, I haven't gone down the rabbit hole to verify that like every retailer I'm using paper bags from or every newspaper I'm using uses a soy-based ink, but a lot of them do, and it's just gonna degrade over time. This is obviously something that you need to decide for your comfort level. If the fact that the bottoms of the paper bags and parts of the cardboard boxes have glue residue on them, if that bothers you, putting that in your soil, don't do it. It doesn't bother me. My risk calculus is pretty high. I know that over time it's going to degrade, and anything that I don't want in my soil honestly is probably going to have a negligible effect. It just works so well that I'm willing to risk using an ink that I may not want in my soil or potentially getting a little bit of glue residue in my soil, just because over time, like it's the least of my concerns really in my garden. I try not to get too bent out of shape about small things like that. Another thing is a breakdown time. So if you're using cardboard boxes, these are going to take a lot longer to break down than like a paper bag or a newspaper would. So when we worked on our front yard last year, we used a lot of newspaper, one, because I like to use what I have, and my wonderful next door neighbor had a giant thing of newspapers for me to use that she was just getting ready to put out for recycling. So I used those and I just pulled out anything that was like shiny advertisements, stuff like that. I mostly use the black and white stuff. Some of the stuff had like colored pictures, and that's totally fine with me as long as it's not like those shiny advertisements things. I laid those down, and those will decompose much faster than like a cardboard box would. So I'm going to show you guys this berry patch. This is our second spring, I think, with this berry patch. It is waking up for the season. This area we used a mixture of cardboard boxes and old like yard waste paper bags and just whatever I could get my hands on, because this was a pretty big area to smother out. This was a pretty easy area to smother out because we actually smothered all of this stuff here before I planted the raspberries. We only had our blueberry plants over here and a couple different other things that just, you know, I had popped in the ground over here. So you can see that there are hyacinth bulbs in here. Now, these hyacinth bulbs I actually planted last fall. So I came in here a little while after we had, you know, sheet mulched this whole area, laid down compost, put down paper bags and cardboard. And there were some areas where when I dug down, I would hit like a little piece of cardboard or something. I'm not too worried about that. I was able to just like dig out the area where I wanted to put the bulb in so I could get the bulb in and make sure it has enough space to sprout and not be blocked in the spring. I'm not worried about the fact that it's still decomposing around the plants, but if you are wanting something that decomposes faster, I recommend laying down a couple thin layers of newspaper or using cut up paper bags like we did today. And then before you put that mulch or before you put the wood chips on, soak them with a hose. Make sure they're super wet. Now they're obviously gonna get wet when it rains, but when you soak them through with a hose, it kind of forms to the ground a little bit better. I honestly just feel like it jumpstarts the decomposition process. Again, I didn't do that today just because our hoses are still winterized. For the winter, we have not turned them on yet, but that's just another thing to keep in mind if you want to jumpstart the process. Everything in our yard behind me that is planted was originally grass, so we have used this method over and over and over. Please save yourself the time, save yourself the headache and the backache, save yourself from digging up all of those buried weed seeds, and don't dig out grass. Just smother it over time. It takes a little bit longer, but honestly, I do think it is the better route to go. So this was one of the first areas that we smothered out, and we have very few weed issues in this area now all around our raised beds, and it has definitely been worth it. If you guys have any questions about prepping areas to plant, how I like to prep areas to plant, how I recommend you do a certain thing based on whatever your situation is, please let me know in the comments. It's definitely not the last video I will be doing about sheet mulching because all of this grass behind us maybe not all of it, but a lot of it we want to eventually be turned into more plantable space. So until my next video, happy planting.